Everybody, welcome back to another Nerds in Squares podcast presented by BP Fun. I'm the host with the most, Captain Zeus, followed by this lovely gentleman, Lucky, here once again. Say hi to the folks, Lucky.
Hi everybody, it's me, Lucky, and we're back. We're back, baby.
Yeah, we got another nerdy podcast episode for you, in case you didn't figure that out. We did drop a video on the main YouTube channel, BP Fun, going over the end of the DCU, kind of like what we were expecting and hoping for into the DCU. And Lucky himself actually did a review on the Aquaman movie, so if you haven't, definitely check that out there. But in this podcast episode, we are going to go over kind of our full thoughts on the DCEU and what we are expecting and hoping for going into Chapter 1 of the DCU now that it is 2024. I mean, we will start off with obviously reminiscing on the past, the previous, the prologue, if you will, to the DC universe. And that would be the Snyderverse slash DCEU, however you want to look at it. And I mean, as a whole, I think, and I've said this before, I think it was good, right? I think it was entertaining. I don't think it was anywhere near Marvel's level, except for the Snyderverse part of it. I think that stirred up tons of controversy, speculation, and debates, and a lot of love for DC again because of those movies. You have Man of Steel, in my opinion, the best Superman movie out there. You have Wonder Woman, which was a phenomenal movie. Absolutely love that movie. You do have Batman v Superman, which has a lot of split, I guess, fans on it. I wasn't a fan of the death of Superman there, but then I grew to kind of go with the flow with it. I still overall loved the movie. I thought Lex Luthor was garbage. But then we got the Justice League, freaking Justice League, or the Justice League, whatever. It was garbage, absolutely garbage. But then Warner Brothers finally listened to fans for once in their lives and gave us the Snyder Cut, which was a marvel of a movie. No pun intended. 4 hours long, and it was worth it. You don't even notice the time go by. And if you guys think that's a long movie, just to let you know, Oppenheimer is 3 hours long, and that movie was phenomenal. One of Christopher Nolan's best movies, if not best movie ever, that he's done. And so people can watch long movies. The length is not the issue, and we've seen it time and time again with movies getting longer and longer, with directors actually fulfilling their full vision, which Zack Snyder's kind of had an issue with, especially if you look at Watchmen, how the original movie was way shorter than his director's cut, which was pretty lengthy. It was a good 3+ hours there. And honestly, with those movies, you also have David Ayer's Suicide Squad in that Snyderverse era, which was it was really entertaining. There was a lot of great castings with it, a lot of good stuff in there. But I think if we would have had David Ayer's actual vision, his actual director's cut, that movie would have been 10 times better. I think it would have been the second or third favorite movie in the DCEU entirely, right? And then you get the Warner Brothers led, or the direct, or I'm sorry, like the Visionary S, or the Visionary S. There was no visionary. There was no one in charge of the DCEU for the remainder of the time period. You had Shazam come in there. I mean, just wasn't that good. It was entertaining, but it was meh. You had Aquaman, which those did come out during Snyder's like reign, if you will, but they still didn't fit like his tone of his universe, and they really weren't that good either, especially compared to the Snyderverse movies. Then you also had, you had Shazam 2 also in there. You had Wonder Woman 2, which was absolutely disgusting. I wanted to vomit. You had Black Adam, which I also wanted to vomit. You did get James Gunn come in with The Suicide Squad, which was really good. That was one of the better entries in the DCEU. And it was so good that it led to a spin-off series called Peacemaker, based on John Cena's Peacemaker from that movie, which was also phenomenal. You did have Aquaman 2 come out as well, which was garbage. You did have the Flash movie, which was also garbage. Like, there was a lot of garbage being made since Zack Snyder's departure. And for some reason, they tried to do a Batgirl movie with a black actress. Honestly, with a I don't know what it is with Hollywood and redheads. They always want to cast non-actual redheads and want to race wash it, and then end up being like, oh, why did this not do good? Oh, I wonder why. And the movie, I honestly didn't think it was going to do well. Just from the way the directors were talking about the movie and what I saw, It just didn't look like it was going to do good. And I'm glad that they cut that movie. I'm glad that that movie never got released. And as a whole, I mean, there was a lot of ups and downs with the DCEU, especially since Snyder's departure. But I think it was fine. I mean, I would say it's better than Phase 4 of the MCU. Wait, are we in Phase 5 in the MCU? I don't even know. They never actually clearly said anything about. Oh, wait, no, we are in Phase 5. Are we in Phase 5? I don't know. The current phase of the MCU. That's the point. It's confusing now. But I mean, I think the DCEU was okay. I mean, I think the Snyderverse portion was peak, right? Like that was great. I went to the theaters for almost all of those movies when they came out. Those four that I meant, five, four, because Snyder Cut was on Max, but HBO Max at the time. See, there's a lot of change happening here, and speaking of change, we are getting that going into this year. With last November, James Gunn was hired as the head of the DCU in terms of the creative side. Peter Safran is the business side of things, and a lot of people are hating it, to be honest. I don't understand why. He's had nothing but success. You know, he had the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, which phenomenal movies, just keeps getting better with each one. With the third one, a amazing send off that made a lot of people cry. You had him do Brightburn, which was a phenomenal horror movie that I was not expecting to enjoy. Right? You have The Suicide Squad, you have Peacemaker, which both of those entries into the DCEU helped keep them afloat and was phenomenal, right? And then you also have all this other stuff that he's done, including the OG Scooby Doo movies, which I thought was amazing. Like, he's got a resume, right? And we'll obviously go into the DCU side of things further on in the podcast episode. But Lucky, what was your reactions and feelings for the Snyderverse and the DCEU as a whole?
Well, Zeus, I'm gonna start this off by taking a little bit of a different approach. So to me, the DCEU that has passed was very half baked. There was really not a lot of direction, and I think it suffered from multiple things. It suffered from, we didn't get the Snyder cut until later, right? They went a different direction, and it kind of killed the hype for the movie. It killed the reviews for the movie, and it made fans kind of feel like, okay, well, by the time they released the Snyder cut, right? Snyder cut was fantastic in my opinion, but by the time they released it, the hype had died down. It was, years, I believe, after the movie released, right? So it just kind of felt like I wish we would have gotten this to start off. And then in stuff like the Ezra Miller situation, some of it was out of Warner Brothers' control. Some of it was kind of out of DC's control. You can't control what another human being does, especially when he's not filming. And that whole situation kind of made the Flash not a character that I wanted to see on screen. I didn't really want to support somebody such as Ezra. But when I saw the movie, once again, it was a trash heap, in my opinion. There was some funny moments here or there, but for the most part, there really was not a lot of direction in it. Then you have the first Wonder Woman movie, which I really enjoyed. The second one, not as good. I felt like the first Aquaman movie was somewhat enjoyable. Second one, not as good. And that's kind of the trend of what you see throughout DC, right? Is like the first Suicide Squad movie, was okay. It had its moments throughout that movie. I liked a lot of the casting, as you said, Zeus. I really liked Will Smith in the movie. Loved Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. I liked Rick Flag a lot in the movie. But the whole Enchantress thing, and we're going to cut Jared Leto out of the movie, and not really give his character a chance, especially when like he was your first promo that you put out. I remember a bunch of people talking about the picture of Jared Leto's Joker, and everybody was so divided on it, and nobody could decide whether they were going to love it, hate it, whatever. And then it doesn't even really end up being a factor in the movie. So I would have liked to see the director's cut from that film. We never really got to see that. And then we get the Suicide Squad with James Gunn, which was incredibly impressive. I love Idris Elba as Bloodsport, I believe. Is that his name? Bloodsport. I loved that they got Margot Robbie back, Rick Flag back, and then you had John Cena's Peacemaker, which was critically acclaimed. A lot of people loved Peacemaker and John Cena within the role. And once again, James Gunn does what James Gunn does, right? He takes a character that you know nothing about. He takes a group of characters that you really haven't heard of. King Shark, yes, people have heard of him from the Flash show and a couple bits and pieces, right? But nobody really was talking about King Shark. Everybody loved King Shark in the movie, including myself. Polka Dot Man, the same way. I thought the way that they did Polka Dot Man within that film was beautiful. He sees his mom, and it's like a whole big thing. To me, it was beautifully done by James Gunn. But that was kind of like the problem with the Snyderverse DCEU, right? It was very hot and cold. I enjoyed the first Shazam movie, the second one, no. Black Adam, it was one of those things that, how do I put this? It was not good. It was exactly what you would expect from a Rock movie where he doesn't really go deep into character. It's just kind of this guy kicks ass, and that's what the entire movie's about, right? And the jokes are kind of flat, and that's the story of the old DCU though. Is like too hot and cold. They really didn't have a direction. It was just kind of like, we're gonna put this content out, we're gonna put this content out. We're gonna show you this, and it's gonna be this though. You know what I mean? And it just, the vision really wasn't there, especially with the back and forth with Zack Snyder, where another director takes over. Okay, now we're releasing the Snyder cut. Okay, well now we have this in the works and we have this in the works, but none of it really gels, right? Like we saw Batman in Suicide Squad for like that split second where he's chasing Harley Quinn and the Joker, and then we see the Joker in the Justice League, and we're like, okay, there's a little bit of connection within this universe. And then after that, it's really no connection at all until end credit scenes. And that's what is bothersome. I feel like throughout a lot of these films, there was opportunity to mention some of these characters throughout the movies. And they really don't. They act like they don't exist for like 95% of the films. And then at the end or in the very beginning, you see them for a split second. It was the same thing in The Flash. You see Batman and Wonder Woman within the first 10 minutes, and then they're never mentioned again. And it's supposed to be this massive thing for the Flash that's going on, right? This entire movie is like, I lost my powers, another version of me has my powers, right? It's a massive thing. And never once does he think, let me call up Batflack. Let me call up Gal Gadot. Let me get my teammates involved in this. No, he ends up finding Michael Keaton. Do you know what I mean? And it's like a whole different multiversal thing that really didn't need to be in the movie. I enjoyed Michael Keaton's Batman back in the day as a kid, but it didn't feel the same. It didn't feel the same. It felt like he was past his prime, obviously, and it was something that it felt unnecessary for a movie, especially in a universe that you knew was dying, to do something that rash, right? Like, I feel like if in the DCEU, right, we have the DC Elseworld with Robert Pattinson's Batman, and we have, you know, Matt Reeves handling that universe with Penguin and Batman and all of that kind of stuff, and then you have the main universe, which is going to be James Gunn's vision. I feel like that would make more sense to down the line put Pattinson's Batman into the DCEU as like an Elseworld collaboration, right? Rather than Michael Keaton at the end of the Snyderverse DCEU. You know what I mean? It just kind of felt like they were just grasping for people to come into the movie theater and to buy tickets with that. There was no direction. The universe was kind of dying, and they were just like, let's try to have that one last hoorah, that one last, let's get everybody in, let's try to make as much noise as possible, especially with Ezra's situation. So, yeah, man, it just felt too hot and cold. It was not a well-oiled machine, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, speaking of hot and cold, I mean, that's like you said, it's a very common theme in the DCEU. But do we think it's going to be a common theme in the Guns and James Gunn's DCU? I mean, Chapter One is looking very spicy, right? We have a mixture of animated and live action content. We have a mixture of shows and movies, right? The previously announced Lantern series that was going to come out on Max like a few years ago, that's still in development, is going to be in the DCU, which I think is amazing. It has gone through a lot of rework, and I'm still excited to see a Max DCU with with Jon Stewart and Hal Jordan, Green Lanterns there. I think that's dope. We also have Creature Commandos animated series that is going to be coming out this year, actually, for the DCU, and all of those actors will be able to reprise their roles into live action. So whoever you play in the DCU, whether it's animated or live action, you will play them in the opposite as well, which I think is smart. That's a smart thing to do. It don't do what Disney does with Marvel and just have some random people that sound alike or don't sound like anything like them and just cast them in there. No, it's smart to have the same actors play the same characters, especially if this is going to be a longevity thing where they're going to be into this for 10 plus years. They're going to know how to be in character, right? Then you have next year with Superman Legacy, the first movie and the first live action movie for the DCU, which James Gunn's writing and directing. And that one's going to be super good. I'm actually really excited with the casting that we have and a lot of the characters in there as well. Not a fan of Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, to be honest. I really wish they would have gone with someone else. However, at the same time, I'm intrigued. It has my interest. And I think that's one thing that DCU does is it keeps my interest, right? We have James Mangold doing a horror Swamp Thing movie, rated R, later on down the line in Chapter 1 as well. We have The Authority, which is basically a rated R Justice League that will kill people. We have that movie coming out as well. We have the Supergirl, I think it's Woman of Tomorrow movie coming out as well, which they did just have a writer on she was the writer that was going to do the Supergirl spinoff from The Flash, the recent Flash movie that came out. And I'm honestly excited for that one as well, just because the Woman of Tomorrow, again, I think that's the name of it. That storyline in the comics is super unique as it is because Supergirl's drifting on a piece of Krypton. So I think that's super cool. And I mean, there's a lot of other projects that are going to be coming out as well. But the fact that a huge difference between like Marvel and DC that I noticed is the fact that we're going with chapters, right? Like it's a story. Chapter 1 is called Gods and Monsters. So not only do we have a theme for this chapter, this phase, but it's also feeling more storytelling, right? More something that you can continuously read, like you can be invested in for this time period. Whereas with Marvel, if you just think of the term phase, it's like something that'll pass by, something that'll just you'll grow out of. But with chapters, it's obviously something that's going to be a continuous linear thing that you can be invested in. And so the theme is Gods and Monsters for this part of the DCU, which I think is a great way to start off. We do have Batman the Brave and the Bold that's going to be coming out as well. Andy Muschietti, who did direct The Flash, is directing that movie, so I am worried. However, it is the Brave and the Bold, which the storyline in the comics is Damian Robin. What we've never seen that on the big screen. The only content we've seen on him really would be the animated universe, which those were still really good movies. And I'm interested to see who they're going to do for that in terms of writing and casting. I know a lot of people want Jensen Ackles as Batman for that, and I think that'd be smart since he does voice him in the Tomorrowverse, the sequel to the animated universe. So I think that would be cool. But this DC universe and this chapter has me nothing but intrigued. Do I have any high expectations? Not at all. But I don't have any low expectations either. I'm 100% interested to see what's going to happen. I'm always just going to wait till the trailer comes out, and then I'm going to have like, okay, this is something I'm going to see. This is something I'm not going to see. But James Gunn has not let me down at all with anything that I've seen from him, right? And there's a clear vision, which is something the DCEU lacked, was vision, right? Once Snyder had a vision, but once they kicked him out, there was no vision for the universe. Now James Gunn has a vision, right? He's the one hiring people for the roles and for the directors. And the directors he's hiring are the writer directors. So you know they're going to be good. James Mangold, once again, if you don't know, he did the Logan trilogy. He did Logan. He did The Wolverine. He did do the crappy X-Men Origins Wolverine movie, but I'll forgive him for giving us the other two as well. Like he's a very good director. And Swamp Thing is a great character to go into, especially if this is going to be a horror rated R one. Like the fact that each movie, and he did mention this earlier, each movie and show is going to have their own theme, their own tone, if you will, depending on who's making it, like who's directing it. And that's smart because that's what every comic is. Like not all of them flow the same way. Like Marvel, where everything is just jokey and comedy and nothing serious anymore, right? Like they're going back with that with Echo, with bringing in the Defender saga, with Moon Knight. Like they're learning from their mistakes. But the DC universe, DC in general, has always been dark, gritty, and just intense. Yes, there's plenty of comedy. We have Plastic Man, for crying out loud. There's nothing but comedy there. We also are getting a Booster Gold series on Max, which that's going to be freaking fun as heck to watch, right? But it does just keep you intrigued, right? There's so many characters in here that don't get enough spotlight that we're going to be seeing more. And I'm honestly just super invested in the DC universe, especially with the downfall of Marvel. This is the perfect time to be a DC fan. So, I mean, what do you think? What are you excited for? Like, what are you kind of really anticipating and hoping? And just kind of like your overall thoughts on the first chapter, at least for the DC universe.
So I do have very high expectations for James Gunn and the DCEU. Reason why is because, number one, I feel like the way that you know something's going to be good, especially a universe, right, is the direction. The direction is here. It's very clear, right, as to the way that they're moving, the way that they're doing these things. They're not scared to step into rated R. They're not scared to do justice by all of their characters. Swamp Thing has never been a nice guy, you know what I mean, or like a nice, happy, feel good type movie. He's a monster. He's a monster. You know, like that is what it is. I also feel like for the Andy Muschietti in Batman: The Brave and the Bold, I I'm not worried. I'm gonna be honest, Zeus. I'm not worried at all. The reason being is because Andy Muschietti in The Flash, right? Let's take a look at what he was working with. He was working with a dying universe, right? He was working with the budget that they gave him, which was crappy CGI. He was also having to deal with Ezra Miller all the time, and that is 90% of the movie. If you know, he's the Flash, and then he's another universal thing of the Flash. So like 90% of that movie is centered around Ezra Miller. And if you know anything about Ezra Miller, you know that he is a head case. That's just plain and simple. That is who he is. Um, so I do have full faith in Andy Muschietti. I feel like in terms of James Gunn, he wouldn't put him in a position if he didn't know for a fact that he was going to succeed. Also, just look at the track record. That's what I want people to realize. Don't go in hating. Look at the track record, right? You put James Gunn with the Guardians of the Galaxy. He rocks it out, destroys it, absolutely kills it. Those three movies right there were by far probably my favorite three movies of the MCU in terms of like the way it goes. You see him in what was the horror movie you mentioned? The
Brightburn?
Superman Brightburn. Brightburn. That is completely different than Suicide Squad and Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Completely different tone. He knocks that out of the park. Like everything that this guy touches, and I'm not saying every single one is as good as the other, but what I'm saying is he does justice by everything he touches. James Gunn is not somebody who is going to leave people feeling like, man, he didn't do it right. You know, he didn't do it justice. Um, that's what I want people to realize is we're getting one of my favorite DC characters in the past 3 years is Damian Wayne. Damian Wayne to me he is a emo queen. He is edgy. You know, he's funny in his own way, right? And I can't wait to see that on the big screen, man. We've had him in a lot of animated movies. I enjoy him. I enjoy the character. I enjoy the edginess and the kind of like intelligence that he has, just like his dad. But he's his own person, and he relies heavily on his individuality and his kind of sense of morale, other than his dad's. And that is like the big talking point of that beef between him and the Bat, obviously. So for me, like that, I can't wait for it. And then on top of it, right, he sees the success of Matt Reeves' universe. So you know what James Gunn does, Zeus? You know what he does? He says, we're gonna make an Arkham series. for Max. And it's going to be horror. It's going to be rated R because what goes on in Arkham is horrendous. It is terrifying, and it is a bunch of bad, terrible, no good people. We're going to make that rated R, and we're going to have Matt Reeves, who did one of the best, and I want to emphasize the best world building in a Batman movie. If you look at Gotham within the Batman, it is everything that you would expect Gotham to be. A bunch of degenerates, rain, crime, like sadistic people, murder, all sorts of crazy stuff. The world building that Matt Reeves has already put into place for the Arkham series to be successful is already there. The groundwork is already there. It's just a matter of applying it. And that's why I have such high expectations, Zeus, is because they are not scared to make things rated R. They're not scared to make an Arkham series where, unlike Marvel, James Gunn is going to paint the picture of these are villains, these are bad people, these are not misunderstood, people who were put in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is a serial killer that you're dealing with. He just murdered 10 prison guards. You know what I mean? Like, what are you going to do? That is what we're dealing with James Gunn's vision of the DCEU. And he has a plan, and there just seems like such a great structure. There seems like such a solid plan in place. Like you said, the animated show. What was it that you mentioned earlier? The animated
Creatures Commando.
Creatures Commando. The same actors who do the animated show are going to be reprising the role in live action. Like there is a sense of structure, and there is a sense of like, hey, we know what we're doing. And when you have that, it's going to naturally attract people, right? When you have a universe that has a direction, it's going to attract people. That's what you see Marvel kind of falling off a little bit, is their lack of direction, right? Their lack of connecting the dots and the connective tissue within their universe. That is when you see Marvel kind of falling off a little bit, and people are like, okay, what is the direction here? What are we doing here? DC is the complete opposite right now. He took a complete hot mess that DC was, and he said, give me time. I'm not going to sit here and try to put a bunch of content out in the next year. No, give me time. I'm going to write the script for Superman. I'm going to hire all the writer directors, and they're both, right? They're both of them. I'm going to build the connective tissue. I'm going to sit down with a terrific director in Matt Reeves and say, make me an Arkham series. I'm going to make Swamp Thing rated R. I'm going to do right by everything that I touch. And if you still hate it at the end, so be it. But I'm going to do right by the characters, the fan base, and the comics. And that's what I'm excited for with James Gunn. I have high expectations, man. I can't hide it.
I will say a couple of things I forgot to mention too, that we both, I think, did forget to mention, is Blue Beetle also came out in the DCEU, and that was one of the peaks of the DCEU. One of my favorite DC movies, or comic book movies in general. Very enjoyable. Soundtrack was great. Lovable characters. And that Blue Beetle is in the DCU. So we will see him return. I can't remember the guy's name, but we will see that actor play Blue Beetle again in the DCU. And then we also do have a couple of other series coming out in the DCU called Waller, based on Amanda Waller, which we do have Viola Davis returning. There are a lot of actors and characters returning from the DCEU, just because, like, one, why wouldn't you? Everyone loves them. Why replace them? But at the same time, I get it, because you couldn't do that with the big three because of the turmoil Joss Whedon and Warner Brothers did with them. Not only did they ruin the reputation and relationship, but really any hope of those characters are returning and those actors reprising it. Like, Joss Whedon made it so Ben Affleck never wants to be Batman or any comic book character again, right? Dwayne Johnson and Warner Brothers basically ruined any future Henry Cavill Superman plans with how Black Adam was. And the fact that with the universe resetting, basically, James Gunn, he needs someone different. Does that mean we'll never get Henry Cavill Superman again? No, he just said he's not going to do it in the solo movies in the DCU. Because in the DC Elseworlds, any director can make any movie about any character with any actor, and it's not fluid. It's no canonness to it. unless you have your own little pocket universes like the Batman, for example, where there's linear stories with it, with that and the Penguin. Now, the Arkham series was something he was working on for his little Batman universe in the DCL's worlds. However, I don't know what happened to the discussions, but that was turned into the DCU Arkham series, which I think is smarter to introduce you to Gotham and some of the people behind it beforehand. Now, that means he can cast a whole bunch of villains that we'll eventually see in Batman movies, right? So we could have Poison Ivy in there. We could have Killer Croc in there. We could have Deadshot in there. We could have Kite Man, like we can have a lot of people in there, and I'm pretty sure they won't show us Joker. Maybe we'll have a hint or a mention, but I don't think we'll see Joker. I don't think we'll see Two Face. If we do, I'm all for it, of course. I don't think we'll see Penguin either. I think we'll see some of the B and lower tier villains in there. And since it's a rated R horror movie, I'm pretty sure we're going to see a breakout and maybe a hint at Batman coming in to save the day.
I love that. I love that, Zeus, because the thing too, right, is when we're talking about hiring Andy Muschietti, who directed the Flash movie, for the DCU Batman, right? You know what James Gunn's doing too? He's putting the pressure on Andy. Because the thing is he's having Matt Reeves direct the Arkham series, right? So Matt Reeves is doing the legwork of your world building. So if you come out and make something completely tonally different than that, then all of a sudden James Gunn's going to be able to spot you and say, that's not what we're looking for, right? That's not what we're doing. Whereas Matt Reeves has the track record, and that difference between them right there, where it's like, hey, I'm going to get this proven guy to build us a show with a bunch of B-list, which I love the fact that Joker, I don't believe, is going to be in it, because all of Batman's rogues gallery is like fantastic. It's like, you could literally, like Victor Zsasz is cool to me, and he's like a C-list villain, I feel like, in the Batman universe. Like, there's so many cool villains and cool characters to explore within the Batman universe that, like, I don't need Joker. Give me the Killer Crocs. Give me the Two Faces. Give me the, you know what I mean? Give me the Poison Ivies and, the Victor Zazes. Give me those guys. Like, you could even give me Asriel, like somebody like him. Give me something like that, where you could even do Deathstroke. Somebody like that, right? Where it's like, hey, and then when you put Andy Muschietti in the film, the expectation is you are going to be able to world build the same way that Matt Reeves world built, right? Because it's in the same universe. That universe is Batman. This is his Arkham Asylum, right? So if you are not able to he's putting the pressure on Andy, in my opinion, because now it's like, hey, Matt Reeves is going to give it a rated R. You know what I mean? Like, he's gonna come out swinging with that. He is, like, just by the way the Batman was. Go ahead, Zeus. I know you gotta say something, man. I
gotta say a couple of things. I don't think he's putting the pressure on Andy because of something I disagree with you on. He says, James Gunn's even said, he's like, each movie and show will be different depending on who they hire on there, so the tones will be different. So I don't think the tone matching will matter, because Andy's tone is going to be completely different than Matt's. Matt's has always been a serious tone. You look at the Planet of the Apes trilogy he did, phenomenal movies. You look at the Batman movie he did, phenomenal movie. I mean, he's done others as well. I'm just bringing those up to mention. And the Arkham series is going to be along the same lines as those, if not a little bit more brutal. Now, Andy's Flash was garbage. That's what has me worried, is that they signed him on. He was one of the first people they signed on in the DCU, and they put him in the Batman one, which that is one of the most important characters and most important franchises in the DC universe. And you have the guy that made the blunder of the Flash in charge of it. That also, it has me a little bit worried of where James Gunn is, because he was promoting that as one of the best superhero movies he's ever seen, and it was nowhere near it, right? And I trust his vision and as a whole, and the stuff he's made I've enjoyed, and I think I'm going to enjoy in the future, like with Superman. I know I'm going to like the movie for sure. As to how good or bad is up in the air until I see a trailer, but It has me worried for the Batman movie. And like it does have me a little worried for the DCU, and it doesn't give me high expectations, because I first of all, I don't want to have high expectations, because if I do, I'm going to judge it too harshly. James Gunn has to literally scrap everything that we've known for the last 10 years, right? Loved and hated for the DCU. And he has to build an entire universe because of how much garbage that was in the past. Warner Brothers literally messed all of that up. And so he's like, instead of having to pick up the pieces and trying to fix this, I'm just going to start fresh, which was probably the smarter move. And his vision is going to be different from what everyone else has. And that's another thing too, is I know a lot of people are going to judge this and compare this to Snyder's stuff, not as the DCEU as a whole, but the Snyder verse, the Snyder version of it, which you can't do. He has one of the most unique minds, one of the most the darker minds when it comes to comic book movies, right? Like his stuff has been phenomenal. Don't get me wrong, but it's going to be different. We're going to have a different tone. But I do like the fact that we'll have different directors give us different tones in the DCU. I mean, we also are getting Peacemaker season 2 in the DCU, which is canon. So we are. It's not like James Gunn can't do dark stuff, but it does have me worried for Batman: The Brave and the Bold, because I don't like Andy Muschietti. I am worried that he's gonna give us another blunder. Do I think the casting is gonna be bad? No, because I actually like the Supergirl who they casted in the Flash movie. I thought that was great. I don't like how they made it a different Supergirl character. I actually don't even like that they made Supergirl in there instead of like using the actual Flashpoint storyline and just copy and pasting that and twist it a little bit. No, they just did a completely different version of it, and it was terrible. But the point is, the woman they casted for Supergirl was great. I loved her. And I think casting as a whole was fine. I thought it was great. So I think casting will be fine. I just think the story's going to be bad.
Now, Zeus, I do have a question for you though. So I do realize what you're saying in terms of like Andy Muschietti's that movie was not good at all. I agree with you in that aspect, right? And I do know that James Gunn tweeted out it's one of the best superhero movies he's seen, right? But here's my thing with that. I have a different approach. I have a different approach with that take. Okay. My opinion on that, and obviously neither of us know because we're not James Gunn, we're not in his head. To me, I think that was his attempt at, now that he had control of the DCEU at that point and he was starting to get it working and, concocting his plan. I think that was kind of an attempt, if you will, to say, hey, like, check out this movie. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that he was necessarily lying, but I feel like a part of that was like producer speak, right? Where it's like, hey, I want this to do well because this is the reflection of me currently, right? And I'm not attached to it technically, right? But I want it to do well because now that I'm taking over DC, I'm hoping that there's at least some positive notes coming out of what I'm about to take over, right? So to me, I do feel like a part of it was him kind of saying, "Hey, like, hopefully this is good." You know what I mean? Like that's how. Now, obviously, people are going to interpret it different ways. Maybe that is what he meant literally. Maybe he just thought that was one of the greatest comic book movies in his opinion. But to me, I do feel like James Gunn is, to a degree, a businessman, and he understands, hey, if I come out and say that this movie's complete dog shit, nobody's going to go see it, and it's really going to hurt, my bottom line, DC's bottom line. So I'm going to try to stir it up a little bit, because just from that tweet, there was going to be people who went in to see the movie, right? Like, there's going to be people who were like, okay, if James Gunn likes it, then I'll give it a chance, right? So I feel like that's kind of a little bit of producer's speech. Do you know what other movies Andy Muschietti's done by chance?
The
I
It
don't.
movies?
The It movies? Okay. I do personally like the It movies. Have you seen any of them?
No, not my stick.
They are very good. So what I do want to say is Andy Muschietti, he is hot and cold, but the It movies is fantastic. If we can get tonally kind of that darker feel from the It movie within Batman's universe, and then kind of like the dark comedy right, that Batman usually has. That's totally on par with the It movies. And then his casting, obviously, of Pennywise was fantastic. I love the actor who played Pennywise. He knocked it out of the park with those two movies, I will say. So I do understand the Flash was bad. I get it. I understand that. I do have not high expectations for Andy himself, but I do have cautiously optimistic expectations for the Batman because I think it's more tonally on par with the It movies rather than the Flash. And that's what I'm hoping he kind of draws from is not necessarily the Flash tone, but the It movie tone, where it's darker humor. It is kind of gritty. He doesn't pull punches in those movies, right? Like obviously Pennywise is murdering a bunch of children. Like that is all very upfront and personal. And that's the kind of stuff that happens within Gotham City as well. Is these psychopaths do kill any and everyone they can get their hands on. And that's what Batman has to deal with. So if he can kind of draw from that experience rather than the Flash, I am cautiously optimistic for Andy Muschietti. The rest of it, the Superman movie, I'm ready. Give me my ticket. I want to see the trailer though for Batman: The Brave and the Bold. Before I say anything about how I feel, I want to see the casting and I want to see the first trailer for Batman: Brave and the Bold. And Zeus, I want you to hold off on the hate train, choo choo, until you see the castings and the trailer. That's all I'm gonna say.
I mean, again, I think he'll do fine with the castings, and I'm I have very low expectations when it comes to the
Yeah.
Brave and the Bold, just because I'm worried. Again, the Flash movie was just dog fire in every way. So I am worried when it comes to that. Obviously, with the DCU, what I'm going to do is just obviously judge it from the trailer first. Castings from like Superman and Creature Commandos, which are some of the first two projects we're going to be seeing, obviously has me hyped because of some of the great castings they've chosen, right? But obviously, we want to see the trailer before we give any quote unquote final judgments before watching the movies or shows. And yeah, I'm very in the middle. Like I think the DCU as a whole will do well, especially with the projects that we have slated. But I'm more so in the middle. I'm not as hyped, especially because a lot of I don't know, maybe it's just superhero movies in general have with like Marvel, for example, just kind of deflated the hype for it. The hype got built back up with the Batman, of course, but we'll just have to see. Honestly, I think we'll just have to see with how things will do with the Creature Commandos, with Penguin coming out. That's in DC Elseworlds, Arkham as well. That'll be coming out very soon. Those three, and then Superman Legacy coming out next year as well.
I'm telling you right now, Penguin is going to be like a mob show. It's going to be fantastic.
Oh yeah,
Check it out, Penguin. I can't wait for Penguin on Max. That's going to be such a mob show. It's going to be like your classic, like mob guy who feels disrespected by everybody. Anything Matt Reeves touches is. I'm not worried about Matt Reeves. You know what I mean? Like I'm not worried about Matt. Even with the Arkham series, I'm not worried about Matt at all. But what I will tell you, Zeus, is I'm with you on feeling a little bit nervous when it comes to Andy. But what I will say is James Gunn is overlooking. That's what I will say. James Gunn, there is going to be some James Gunn influence, right? And I'm not saying it's going to be massive, but I will say that James Gunn will probably have something to say if it's trash. Like I will say that. I will say that, man. James Gunn doesn't do anything half-assed the same way Matt Reeves does, bro.
look,
He
man. I mean,
doesn't.
you've been riding the Muschietti dick train all freaking podcast, man. You've been boosting that guy up, but you know what? We'll let it end here to see what everybody else thinks. What do
Yeah.
you guys think about the DCEU since it's closed now? It is finally that page in the prologue has been over, and we have James Gunn's DCU to look forward to this year. And what do you think of Andy Muschietti taking on the Batman movie? I mean, that's obviously two different opinions we have here. But yeah, I mean, that's going to do it for us here in the Nerds and Squares podcast. Captain Zeus, that there's Lucky, and we'll catch you guys later. A peace.
Peace.